destroying people.
You know, as I listen to you, something strikes me, and I'd like to throw this out for discussion or anybody who wants to answer it. You've mentioned a number of countries in which there have been oppressions and repressions, and in which man has been hateful to his brother, and in which this anger expresses itself in a demonstration of one kind or the other. What strikes me is that almost, I think, all the countries you've mentioned are countries in the Western world, countries where we know about repression and where we have an opportunity to demonstrate against them, as we've had in Washington here today. This is not really a flag-waving question of mine, but I've been a foreign correspondent for a quarter of a century. All of you gentlemen have worked overseas. It does occur to me that demonstrations of this kind could not easily be held elsewhere. And when we talk about oppression and repression, I haven't seen any march on Moscow or march on Peking. And with all the faults that we have and which we're trying to examine, wouldn't you agree it's fair that the hope of our country is that we can have demonstrations of this kind?
Well, I happened to remark to Jim Baldwin on our way down this morning. I suddenly turned, I saw these fantastic preparations going on, and I found myself saying that this is wonderful, this is horrible, this is joyous, and this is depressing, that this is the only country in the Western world, almost, I think in England it could happen, probably possibly in France.
In the whole world.
Yes, in which this could happen, a meeting like this, but it's also the only country in which it is necessary. This is the frustrating thing, that surely we can have a meeting like this today in this country, but at the same time, it is necessary in this country. You see, what to me the most important thing is that freedom, true freedom, is not given by governments. And freedom is taken by the people. And the excitement of today, in my mind, is the fact that 1 out of every 1,000 Americans was here in Washington, and that the people of America are becoming aware that this freedom to their fellow human beings, and I call them human rights, are theirs to give. The Civil Rights Bill is not as important as the fact that the people have freedom to give, and I think now will begin to give it.
Mr. Heston was about to come in on this. Earlier you said very modestly and with considerable humility that until recently you'd reserved your civil rights position for cocktail parties. That's no longer true. Would you expand on that for us?
I'm afraid I have very little to expand in terms of direct action beyond my participation in the most moving events of today. But I would, to some extent, disagree, at least as I understood Joe's and Marlon's point. The prime thing I extracted from today's events was a quite hopeful and stirring feeling of for the future, and also a restatement of the principles on which this country was founded. Dr. King said most eloquently that now seems finally to be the time when the check which the Negro American has presented so often and had returned to him marked insufficient funds may at last be on the verge of being cashable, and in terms of equality with his fellow Americans. But as an American, I am as stirred by the fact that this is true as I am by whatever capacity I have to empathize with my Negro fellow citizens in their eloquent cry that it finally happened now. And I cannot forget that, as you suggested, this is a country and a system of government that was, however tardy we are in extending freedom to all its citizens, we conceived the idea of freedom for all citizens under the law. And among the many eloquent things that were said today, James Baldwin has written as eloquently as anyone on this subject, but most of the men who have written on civil rights and spoken on it trace back what they speak about to the statements made by Lincoln and Jefferson. And although the end is not yet, as Harry suggested, this is perhaps a beginning. And the times ahead are just as difficult as the times behind, although in